All right, welcome everyone. We're going to get started pretty much right on time today. This is one of our first workshops in October. So this is your friendly reminder that our end of year healthy lifestyles is on October 31st, which means your annual physical and all your points need to and recorded on Well Steps before October 31st in order for you to receive your annual HSA and cash incentive. So please make sure that you have gotten your annual physical and turned it in, and then of course recorded those points on Well Steps. You can get that money. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us at Healthy Lifestyles. But today we are going to be talking about the book Happier Hour. Happier Hour was written by Cassie Holmes, who has a PhD and is currently working out of Stanford University. She also has worked for Wharton as well as the University of Pennsylvania in their business schools. And she currently teaches an entire course on happiness and the importance of being happy. And so this book is based off of her course. And it's just a great book to learn a little bit more about time management skills. And so instead of you having to do the hard work and reading it, I read the book for you. And so now we can break it down and kind of pull out all the things that she teaches us. So the goals for this workshop is I want you to be able to walk away with the tools to know how to spend your hours and feel confident and content in those choices, how to sidestep and recognize the distractions that we have in our day-to-day life, to know how to create and savor moments of joy, and then of course to know how to design your schedules so that you can optimally manage your time and give you purpose. These are the same goals that she lists out in her book. And since we're just taking all of the information straight from her book, of course, those are going to be our goals for today. This will be a little bit more of an interactive workshop. So if you can, try and put away some distractions. I also highly recommend you taking out some paper and a pen or grabbing your phone where you can jot down some notes. There's a lot of different activities and thought-provoking activities that we're going to do together to try and find ways to find more time in our day in a day that has a set 24 hours. So without much ado, let's talk about a couple of things. So I want you to raise to your hand, or you can throw it in the chat if you've ever thought to yourself, there's just never enough hours in the day. I know that I have, for sure. And studies have shown that having so in this book, we talk a lot about time poverty, okay? So time poverty is that feeling of having too much to do and too little time to do it, right? That idea of there's just never enough hours in the day. And oftentimes we think, right, like if I could just move to a beach, I would be so much happier. But studies have shown that having too little discretionary time, so discretionary time, right, is that time where literally we can do whatever we want. Think less than 2 hours a day, they were less happy. But in case you think that that is your perfect reason to quit your job, move to the island, spend your day underneath a cabana drinking Mai Tais and soaking in the sun, those same studies actually found that having too much discretionary time, so having more than 5 hours a day, also decreased our happiness. And the reason is because we are creatures of structure and we like to have a purpose. And so when we have not enough time, we're unhappy. And when we have too much time, we're also unhappy. And so throughout this workshop, we're going to really focus on how our time management skills and understanding what we do with that time can create more happiness. We live in a society where we're often taught that money equals happiness, and if you can just get that next raise or finish paying off X, Y, and Z, then we will be much happier. But when we think about money, it often leads to feelings of stress and anxiety and sometimes hopelessness. But this workshop is all about happiness and learning how to find joy in our everyday lives and not waiting for the joys to happen in the future. And so in order to do that, we need to focus on using the 24 hours of day that we get to increase our joy rather than the external factors like jobs and money that we may not have a say in. So here's your thought experiment number 1. I want you to throw it in the chat if you're willing to share, because a lot of us will have the same answers, I'm sure. But what is the first thing that gets cut from your schedule when you don't have time? Throw it in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself. We've got exercise, the gym, sleep, house cleaning, sleep. House cleaning gets pushed to the sides, chores and laundry, cooking, self-care, fun. Yes, for sure. So, as you can see, you're definitely not alone, right? Oftentimes we feel like we don't have enough time and we cut out the things that are healthy and enriching for us, right? We've done enough workshops. You've been alive long enough to know that sleep and nutrition and physical movement, right? Those are all things that are incredibly nourishing to our bodies. Having fun, right? Our interests and the things that make us interesting, those are important. But when we feel like we don't have time, right? When we're in that time scarcity mindset, we put all of those things on the back burner. We neglect moving our bodies, we neglect sleeping, we neglect nourishing our bodies, we neglect all of our hobbies, we neglect our relationships, and we put them on the back burner, and we definitely don't invest in new ones. And if we live our life in this very narrow frame of thinking, right, and we end up feeling stuck, we feel stuck, like we can't find the time to do all those things that we want to do. And if the chat didn't make you at least feel like you're not alone, please know that over 60% of Americans also feel this exact same way. And so there has been hours and hours and tons of money poured into research trying to figure out why we have these feelings of time scarcity, and how we can overcome them. And what Dr. Holmes suggests is that when these feelings of being stuck or being alone, it comes from that scarcity mindset. And without enough time, we are limited in doing and becoming our best, right? And so we want the reverse of that. We want happiness and we want to feel like we can achieve all the things we were meant to achieve in this life. And so her next thing that she talks about is this idea that less is not more, right? Sometimes we say less is more. I mean, we just need to cut things out. But there's been a lot of research showing that there are certain tasks that actually give us back time. And some of these tasks are all the things that we've been talking, right? So cutting our sleep, exercise, and nutrition actually results in less clarity and less energy and less focusing of our brains. And so when we cut these activities, we're creating more issues. We're creating brain fog and memory loss, exhaustion, poor task follow through. Moving less results in poorer health and poor energy levels. Poor nutrition results in all of the same, right? Brain fog, lack of energy, poor health. And so we know that these are important, but when we cut these activities out of our routine, we actually end up having less time during the day because of the benefits of being healthy, right? Because of the benefits of sleeping, our mind is clearer and we're able to complete tasks much faster. When we're making sure that our body is fueled, once again, we have energy to go about our day. We're not getting sluggish. We're not hitting that 2 or 3 o'clock slump. When we're exercising, it has been proven to help give us clarity of mind, as well as decrease our cortisol levels. And so by adding in these things that we tend to cut, we actually can give ourselves more time. And the other things, so she talks about two more things. She talks about kindness. And so she quotes a study, and it was done by John Darley and Daniel Batson in the 1970s. And what this study was is it put together a group of seminary students who were tasked with presenting the parable of the Good Samaritan. So if you're unfamiliar, that's the Bible story about the stranger who stopped and helped a person who had been robbed and beaten on the side of the road. But here was the catch. So right before the students were told that they needed to present this, one by one, they were either told that they were late for their presentation or that they were told nothing. And so on their way to their presentation in the hallway, there was a man hunched over, coughing, and in clear distress. And what the researchers tracked were who would stop and who wouldn't stop. And if you can't see the irony in that, right? Having married less were teaching, and yet would they help? And as you can probably predict, the students who were told that they had limited time, they were significantly less likely to stop and try and help the man. And so we can see that not only does time scarcity and cutting out these really important activities make us physically unwell, it also affects our social health, which is a very key portion of health. And so we want to make sure that we're trying to stop and talk to those around us and serve and slow down. The last thing that she talks about is how when we feel like we don't have enough time, we actually feel less confident. We feel less confident in our work projects. We feel less confident in our ability to perform well at all of our responsibilities. And when we feel we have more time, we tend to better and perform measurably better. And so I want to point out that this does not mean we actually have to have more time. We simply have to find ways to feel like we have more time, right? All of us have the same 24 hours in a day and 60 minutes in each of those hours. But time scarcity is all about how we feel about the time that we do have. And so here is some of the things that we can do about it, right? So remember that subjectivity is important because everyone will have different priority levels, and that's okay. The goal here is trying to change and shift our mindset to feeling like we have more time than maybe we actually do. So when we're thinking of that time poverty definition, what we're including in there is what you want to do and what you need to do, and then your confidence in being able to accomplish all those things with the time that you have. And the three main things that she recommends limiting, so are social media. And because while social media can be wonderful in garnering social connections and keeping our families and friends updated about our lives, few humans successfully scroll through social media for the sole purpose of social connection. Instead, we can find ourselves sucked in, and our already time poor day is now even more time poor as we spent it scrolling social media for 30 minutes, an hour, maybe even 2 hours. And then this is also very similar with the on-demand nature of our life. At our fingertips, we basically have anything we could ever want to help distract us, right? We have shows, we have TV, we have podcasts, TED Talks, songs, performances, and all of these are readily available. And this is where it's so important that we are pausing and deciding if it's actually worth our time and energy to spend time on these enticing activities. And then last but not least, chores is one of those things that we always know that we should be doing or could be doing better. And it's in just an ever-growing list, especially if you're a social media scroller and you can see what everyone else seems to be able to accomplish, but you can't. And this is where, when we're limiting our list, it's important to just break it down, right? We don't need to be perfect when it comes to our chore list. Instead, we want to make it simple and accomplishable. So rather than feeling overwhelmed at tackling our chores in the house, we can give ourselves permission to do the one chore that we have for the day and then spend the rest of the time on other more important and wholesome activities. So now that we know what not to do and the things that we should be doing, but that we often cut first, she recommends in her book 3 different activities to add time. And so I challenge you to find time in the next coming weeks to try these. The first one is to get moving. This doesn't have to be perfect, but our goal here is to move our bodies every day intentionally for 30 minutes for 2 weeks. Once again, this is intentional movement, but we don't need to make it harder than it needs to be. So if you enjoy going to the gym, great, do that. If you enjoy spin classes or aerobic classes, that's great. Healthy lifestyles, we also do Zumba classes as well as some yoga classes, so you could always join us for a couple of those. But this could also just be an at-home yoga session or an at-home workout video or something as simple as going for a walk or a jog or a bike ride or a hike or walking your dog. You don't need to complicate it. We just want to set 30 minutes aside each day to get up and move. And then after the 2 weeks, she asks us to reflect. Did taking that 30 minutes each day actually give you less time, or did it help you feel like you had more time in your day? Did it decrease feelings of stress and time scarcity? And so we want to journal that so that when we're back to that mindset of all the things that we can cut, we choose not to cut those. The second activity are much easier, I feel like, to actually do, and it's the random acts of kindness. So over the next 2 weeks, we want to complete 2 random acts of kindness, one for a friend and one for a stranger. And this could be anything. It could be paying for someone's order at your local coffee shop, giving someone a compliment, helping someone with a task, maybe even a coworker right at work that's beyond expected. It could be bringing someone a meal or a treat or leaving a note or writing a note. And so anything that you can do to serve, but is whatever you do choose to do, we're doing it with the sole purpose of benefiting someone else and expecting nothing, not even a thank you, in return. And then once again, reflecting on how it made you feel and if it took away too much time that you made it feel like it wasn't worth doing in your day, or if it helped kind of decrease that time scarcity. So that's the second one. I see that there's a question in the chat. Is the 30 minutes of movement in a row, or can it be broken up? Normally here at Healthy Lifestyles, we would say 100% it can be broken up, but for the sake of this activity, we want it to be in one chunk, just so that you can see that those 30 minutes are still valuable to be done all at once. So normally yes, but for this activity, we're going to say no, we want it 30 minutes all at once. And then last but not least, the third activity is experiencing awe. And this is a great one to go along with our Park RX program that we have right now. But the feeling of awe is elicited when you're exposed to something so perceptually vast that it alters your understanding of the world. And we can elicit this feeling in a few different ways, right? So we have social interactions, and this can be felt when we are in a intimate social connection. This could be the experience of holding a newborn or holding the hand of an aged loved one. It also can be experienced through deep conversations with a friend or a loved one. But that's the social connection that can help us experience awe. We can also experience awe through nature, which we definitely have plenty of in Utah. So you can take a drive up the canyon and enjoy the beautiful fall leaves, hike, look over the vastness of the mountains and the canyons, or spend time on the lake and feel that calmness of the water. And then, of course, there's also art. And we have many, many museums here in Utah that you could explore all the world's wonders through the eyes of different artists and their creativity. And then there's that individual accomplishment. So we can always reflect back on a time in our life where you skillfully and proudly accomplished a very difficult feat, and take time to reflect on that, write in your journal. And all of these can help us elicit awe. But over the next 2 weeks, we want to take at least some time to set aside to actually elicit this feeling, because when we take time to find the awe in the world, it can help us decrease our feelings of scarcity and instead find feelings of joy and plenty. So that's your first challenge for today's workshop. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay, awesome. Okay, we're gonna see, you might have to help me troubleshoot. If this doesn't work, I can just talk you through it. But I'm gonna play this video, which is just a 40-second clip. This is Cassie Holmes herself just explaining her time tracking activity, which is the next activity we're gonna recommend that you do. So let me know if you can't hear.
We can't hear it. Also,
Can't hear it?
if you unshare and share, there's a button that says share with sound. When you go to share it, that
Yeah,
should work for you.
that should work. Give me 2 seconds then. Share. Okay, let's see if it works now.
Which activities produce the greatest and the least?
Yep.
Can you hear?
Good to go. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Let me go.
How you choose to spend your time has a significant influence on how happy you feel. And time tracking helps you discover which activities produce the greatest and the least amount of happiness, and they aren't always the ones that you predict. So track your time for at least 1 week, writing down what you're doing and rating how you're feeling while doing it. There's a helpful worksheet and more detailed instructions in my book, Happier Hour. And from this, you'll have the personalized data you need to identify your happiest moments, those that you absolutely must create time for in your coming weeks to make more of your hours happier hours.
Okay, so that was just a little introduction to this activity. But remember, we said time poverty is very subjective. And so this activity is to help you identify the activities that make you the happiest, and thus the activities that you need to find more time for. And so there, of course, are going to be activities that are necessary for living, activities that are unnecessary, and then activities that also make us time poor. And so it is going to take a week, and it might seem a little bit tedious, but I promise it will help you regain your power over time. And so this is what the worksheet looks like, and you can just go onto her website. It's just cassieholmes.com to grab this, or I'm happy to email it to whoever would like it. But you can see that it's broken up by the 7 days a week, and then it's 7-minute increments, which can seem like a lot, but oftentimes we change what we're doing. Even if we're at work, right? We can take 30 minutes emailing, and then we do 30 minutes working on a project, and then 30 minutes chatting with a coworker. And it's not just broken up into, oh, I worked for 4 hours, right? And so we want to break it up into 30-minute increments so that we can see exactly what we're doing. And then we want to use a scale of 1 through 10 to determine how happy it made us. So 1 is going to be not happy at all, and 2 is very happy. And the whole purpose of this is simply to record what we're doing throughout our day and how we're spending our time. We don't spend our time the same way every single day. And so while this can seem a bit silly, especially if we work, 40 hours a week, 5 days a week, it's important to still see what we're doing with the time that we are given. Thanks, Megan. Megan just threw that in the chat for you. So any questions about this activity? We know that on average, people tend to feel the happiest when they're either being physically intimate or socializing with friends online and with family members. And so remember that happiness is not just about immediate enjoyment. Our goal here is to also show what activities have more meaning in our life, even if they aren't necessarily our favorite. Well, let's see if it'll load. Mm-hmm. Well, the picture didn't load, but talking about meaning and enjoyment, it's important to recognize that they're very closely related. So when you complete your time tracking activity, keep in mind that there are going to be some activities that are more meaningful, for example, work, but aren't typically very fun, right? So if you're picturing a graph and you have more meaningful on the x-axis and more enjoyable on the y-axis, usually work can kind of falls on that more meaningful but less fun. And typically there are things like watching TV that fall on that less meaningful, but maybe kind of a little bit more on that fun axis. And so the level of happiness and meaning for each of us are going to vary. Every person is different, every situation is different. So it's important to complete the tracking activity so that we can get all the data we need to know how to best allocate our time. Which then, of course, brings us to time waste management. There are 3 main things that people talk about when it comes to our time sucking chores, and those are going to be chores, work, and commuting. But there are definitely ways that we can work around these, right? These are things that we can't necessarily get rid of out of our schedule, but there are workarounds. When it comes to chores, if you are privileged enough and have the opportunity, she highly recommends spending money to buy out chores and to reinvest that time into more fulfilling ways. So she recommends, creating a budget. And if you're seeing that your budget is eating out a lot, can you reallocate some of that money you spend on eating out instead to spending money on your chores that you need to do at home? That way your house can feel more relaxing and you can create closer relationships at home rather than spending that money outside on other things. And once again, I just want to point out that of everything in the book, this is probably the most privileged statement that she definitely makes. And so this is definitely one that not everyone is going to be able to do. But I also think, if you don't live alone, if you have a partner or if you have kids, or if you have a roommate, it's important to also divvy up the equity in the chores, right? We don't want it to fall on just one person in the household. And instead, if we can split it up and make it more equal, we can get some of that time back. The second thing is work, right? We want to find out our why when it comes to work. No job is perfect, but if we can align our job with your values, which is what you care about, your strengths is what you're good at, and your passions, what you love doing, we can feel more motivated and more satisfied with the time we spend at work. And we're going to do another activity in just a minute about how we find our why. And then last but not least is the commute. A lot of us commute into work. Some of us might only have 10 or 15 minutes. Some of us drive an hour to work. And so when it comes to our commute, it's important that we're not using this as a time wasting opportunity. Instead, we can use it to garner more time in our day. We know that social connection is incredibly important to helping us feel more time wealthy. And so, if you can, use that commute as a time to build connections, right? Call your family member or a friend or someone that you can then garner a social connection with. Um, if you have the option, ride public transportation and use it as a time to complete a hobby that you wouldn't necessarily have time for. You can use it to read or knit or write or learn a new language. Um, you can listen to a podcast or a book if you need to, if you're driving. But these are times that we can then fill our cup with things that we enjoy doing rather than using it as a time where we just feel frustrated because we're not home. And so when it comes to our commute, we want to make sure not to get distracted by the activities that do not bring us joy. If listening music brings you joy and helps you feel replenished in your day, great. But if it's not serving you, maybe try and find another way to spend your commute. Okay, so that why activity that I talked about, if you can, I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes to kind of work your way through this. So it might get quiet for a minute. But the 5 whys activity is there because it is so important that we understand our purpose and what drives us. For each of us, that's going to be very different. And so I want you to take out a sheet of paper and or you can put it on your phone or your notes or write an email to yourself, however you want to do it. But I want you to write down what is your why. So why do you do the work that you do? And then once you have that surface level answer, I want you to ask yourself, why is that important? This is going to get harder as we go along. So now look at your answer for number 2. And I want you to ask yourself, why do I care about that? And write it down. And then look at that answer for number 3 and question it again. And why do you care about that? And then ask yourself one more time. Get to that 5th layer of why is that important to you? We all have a surface level of why we do what we do, but the goal of this exercise is meant to help us dig deeper and get to the root of what drives us, because that root, that ultimate purpose, is what's going to help us know how to best spend our time and why we even want to spend our time that way. So now that we know what is important to us, let's recap a little bit of everything we've discussed. So we've discussed what makes people feel that they do not have enough happiness in their life, and that is time scarcity, which results in feelings of anxiety and overwhelm for everyday tasks. We then discussed how we feel a lack of hours in the day results in us giving up healthy activities that then affect us physically, socially, and mentally. And so we have an activity to add those back into our day, and that's our activity with movement, our activity with kindness, and then our activity with discovering awe. And then we have our time tracking activity. So this is the assignment that's there to help us see how we are spending each day and what activities brings us joy and what do not. Plus, we then discuss the necessary activities of chores, work, and commuting that are sometimes not the most joyful, but by identifying our why, we can then help spend our time a little bit more wisely in those areas. And so the next thing we're going to discuss is how we can get rid of distractions. Another factor in the happiness versus time scarcity model is recognizing that when our mind is racing and going a million different directions, even when we're doing something that is supposed to be bringing us joy, we can instead miss out on that feeling and still be stuck in the time scarcity mindset. And so we want to find some ways that can help us get rid of distractions. So raise your hand or give me a nod or a thumbs up if you keep a running list in your head of all the things you need to do throughout your day. Pretty much everyone. Okay, and then I want you to think of that list right now. And how does it make you feel? Throw it in the chat. What are your feelings when you're thinking of that list? Overwhelmed, stressed, too much to do? Yes, it causes us to have anxiety, right? All of a sudden, we're tired and we feel like we don't have enough time in the day. And I want you to then also think about how many times you have let that running list affect the activity you're presently doing. So, for example, and you don't have to raise your hand to admit this, but have you ever been sitting in a meeting or a team meeting or a conference and also maybe ordered something on Amazon or, done your grocery pickup list or scrolled social media while you're supposed to be relaxing, right? Have you ever sat in front of the TV and you're supposed to be watching a movie or a show with a significant other and instead your mind can't stop racing, so you have your phone in your hand looking at other things as well? Or has there been times that you have been sitting down to dinner with loved ones and instead of focusing on the things that they're saying, instead you're focusing on the list in your head and jotting down ideas or looking at your phone trying to accomplish some of those tasks? So hopefully some of that at least made you feel like you're not alone and resonated with you. And while we recognize that some distractions are good and they can help us escape current negative situations, when our mind wanders, our current joyful moment suffers since we're not thinking about what's going on in the moment. And so there are 4 things that Dr. Holmes recommends that we do. The first, and this is a hard one as I've tried to implement it, is treating your weekend like a vacation. Americans by nature are really, really bad at taking vacations, but vacations really help us break from our normal routine and help us to be able to find joy in the small pleasures of life. And so the goal is to take at least one day out of your 2-day weekend and to treat it like a vacation, quite literally. So the other day of the weekend, you can spend completing all your necessary chores and doing all those tasks that you need to. But then for at least 24 hours every weekend, pretend you're on vacation. Put your phone away, go chat with some loved ones and pretend you're in a foreign city or on a beach. Go sightseeing. Wake up late. Try that new restaurant you've been meaning to visit and make one day out of your 7-day week fun. It's much easier said than done. I will say that. The second recommendation is meditation and mindfulness. It's really important that when our mind starts racing, we have the tools to be able to bring us back to the now and in the present. I am not very good at this as well, but if you need help to know where to get started, we have Megan Matson, who's one of our health educators at Healthy Lifestyles, and she does an amazing job. We have our monthly mindful moment that she hosts, as well as starting in November, she'll have a 6-week journey to inner peace, which is all about mindfulness and learning how to recenter. So if you need more help on that front, I can't recommend her enough. The third thing she recommends is shutting the door. How many times do we leave our office door open, or whether that be physically at work or mentally at home? And the result is we have people constantly stopping by and interrupting our focus time. And it's really important that we allow ourselves undivided focus times. We know that out of an 8-hour workday, most employees are only truly effective for up to 2 to 4 hours of that workday. And this will be most effective if you're able to truly focus your time and spend it undivided on your projects or whatever you need to. And so if you have a physical door, allow yourself to shut it and to give yourself that distraction-free time. If you work from home, block some time in your calendar so that your coworkers know that you're unavailable and that that's your focus time. If you're at home and you have a home office, buy a lock where you can shut the door and lock the door and give yourself that undivided focus. And then the fourth thing she recommends is one that we're all very familiar with, but it is the digital detox. And this is to take a break every single day from your phone. So pick a time, or better yet, maybe multiple times throughout the day, where you set your phone down and you do not pick it up for any reason. You can, on most phones nowadays, you can do not disturb time, and you can, make it so that only certain people are allowed to call you in case of an emergency. But other than that, we want to fully take a break from our phones, put it in a different room, turn it off, and don't let it bother you. Megan said, I just bought an alarm clock for this reason. I love that. Okay, the time jar. I want to read you a story that she talks about in the book. So bear with me as I read it. She says, a professor walks into his classroom and every seat is filled. He places a large clear jar on the front desk. He unloads a big bag onto the desk chair, and out of the bag he pulls a box of golf balls and empties the golf balls into the jar. He asks the students, is the jar full? With the golf balls reaching the top of the jar, the whole class nods and answers yes. The professor seems to agree, but then he reaches into the bag again and pulls out a container of small pebbles. He pours them into the jar. The little rocks tumble over and around the golf balls, filling up the crevices, and the professor asks his students, is it full now? Again, the class nods and answers yes. Next, out of the bag comes a container of sand, which the professor pours into the jar. The sand covers the golf balls and the pebbles, now. Is the jar full? The student bottles of this bottle
Kirsten, if you are talking, we have lost audio.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm so sorry. My whole internet just went down. Give me just a second.
Do you want me to share the slides?
That would be great, Brittany.
Perfect.
Okay, so it cut out while I was reading. I apologize. But basically, the whole moral of the story, while Brittany is pulling that up, is that the jar represents life, right? So the golf balls are the important things, your family, your friends, your health, and your passions. And the pebbles are the other important things, your job and your home. The sand is everything else. It's just the small stuff. Now, if you put the sand in the jar first, you won't have room for the pebbles and the golf balls. And the same is true of life. If you spend all your energy and time on the small stuff, you won't have time for the really important things that matter to you. So place your golf balls first, set your priorities because everything else is just sand. And so I really liked this analogy because I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in filling our time with the sand, with all the small stuff, that we forget that there are golf balls and pebbles in our life that we need to make a priority into our life. And so some of the ways that we can do that is we get stuck in these sand traps. So Brittany, if you want to go to the next slide, and we're going to cruise through these next slides. So we all have different sand traps. So while I'm discussing the first two, I want everyone to throw in the chat some of their sand traps. And so one of the ones that she talks about is our phone. I challenge you to grab a sticky note and put it beside your desk or wherever you normally at and tally every time you pick up your phone. I think you might be very, very surprised at how often that phone is a sand trap in our time. The second thing that she talks about is we have this sand trap of saying yes, especially in our culture today. And we volunteer to do more than we can handle. And this could be at work. It could also be at home with friends or with our kids and their school needs. And it's important to recognize that it's okay to say no. And that sometimes there's just not the time, and that's okay. We don't have to be that important. And so I want everyone to throw some of their other sand traps in. What are some things that you end up filling your time with that is really unnecessary? I can go first. So one of my sand traps is actually cleaning my house. I often let my cleanliness of the house take up more time than it should. I spend more time cleaning rather than spending more time engaging with those around me. And I need to be better at just recognizing that people matter more? So if you have some of those sand traps, throw them in the chat. It's important that people feel like they're not alone when it comes to this topic. Okay, next slide, Brittany. The last thing that we're going to discuss today is called time crafting. So this is what is like the pinnacle of the book. This is what everything has led up to. Because now that we've talked about the science and some of the strategies behind time scarcity, it's time to craft our ideal week so it can bring us more joy. She recommends using like a white sheet of paper and making it beautiful. We are visual creatures, and even if we're not creative and artistic, we can still do this in a very visual way. So you can see on the picture there, that's what she kind of wants it to look like. That's your canvas. So we're going to start by sketching our canvas. And you can just, you can do this on a piece of paper. You probably won't be able to finish it as we're finishing this workshop, but it'll at least give you a head start. Okay, so step 1, if you want to move to the next one, is blocking out time for your set tiles. So these are things like work and commuting. Depending on the time of year, it might be when, if your kids have soccer, or if you have specific things that you have to do no matter what. So that's step 1, block out the time for your set tiles that you have no real control over. And then your second step is to place your joyful tiles. So if you want to go to the next slide, this is kind of what it can look like. So everyone's going to be different on what those joyful tiles are. And that's where the time tracking activity is so important, because sometimes we don't recognize what's bringing us joy until we track our time. So you want to do this after you've tracked your time and you've decided what it is that actually brings you joy. She then lists out a lot of strategies that we can use when it comes to placing our tiles. So if you go to the next slide, she has 18 different strategies, and some of these are going to work for you and some of them are not. But the first one, and we'll just read them through together, but she says, protect time for social connections. Remember the importance of social connections when it comes to our happiness. The second one is protecting the time that really matters to you by making them a no phone zone. And then once again, remember her recommendation for maximizing times of joy by outsourcing chores. So whether that be to other members of the household, or if you can afford it, to pay for some of those chores to be done. Number 4, assign time to focus on what's good. 5 is establish a tradition of getting together regularly. And you're going to see this throughout her list. Once again, it's that social connection that's so key to helping us feel like we have more time. Which is number 6, dedicate time to fostering friendships. Sometimes we get stuck in our mindset of never allowing ourselves to grow in the relationships we do have, and we want to set time aside for that. Number 7 has to do with kind of habit stacking, right? So we want to bundle an activity you have to do with one that you want to do. So for example, maybe you want to connect with your friend from high school, but you haven't had the time to do it. You also have a 30-minute commute every day. Bundle that together. Pick up the phone and call that friend from high school on your commute. And then you're bundling what you have to do with one that you want to do, which will give you more time in your day. 8, protect time without distraction to pursue your purpose. So this could be work time, or it could be outside of work time. So if you find fulfillment in your purpose through work, perfect. If not, make sure you're still setting time aside for your purpose. Number 9, schedule the times you need to be alert during times you are naturally alert. This is really important. If you have the ability to schedule meetings, studies have shown that the worst possible time to schedule a team meeting or an important strategy meeting is between the hours of 2 and 4 p.m. That is when everyone crashes And so we want to try and avoid those hours when it comes to productivity. Number 10 is remove distractions and set up time to enter that flow. 11, carve out time to spend however you want. 12, carve out time to think. This carving out time to think, she talks about how this could be bundled with movement. So if you like to run or go for a walk or go for a hike, this can also be your set aside thinking time, and you're once again bundling those two activities. Protect your time to do nothing. Break up and spread out activities you enjoy. Don't just create your joyful moments all at the end of the day. Try and sprinkle them throughout so that your day feels more fulfilled. Consolidate the activities you don't enjoy. If you have the ability, try and shorten the time you spend on them. And then 16, bundle an activity you enjoy with a chore. So if you like to listen to books or listen to podcasts, throw in your headphones and do a chore while you're doing that. 17, schedule a positive activity directly following a negative activity. Once again, that's just there to help motivate you through those negative activities. And then 18, continue to mentally revisit your positive experiences. So, every few months, maybe go out and, do your time tracking sheet again so you can see what's bringing you joy and what's not. And then if you go to the next slide, this is just an example of what a final time mosaic could look like. Once again, it's going to be different for everyone. We all have different purposes and different things we're excited about in life. So we are ending exactly 3 minutes before the hour. Thank you so much for bearing with me when it comes to all my technology issues. And Brittany, thanks for sharing the slides. Let me know if you have any questions. Throw them in the chat. I hope that this was helpful for you. I really enjoyed her book. So if you want to read her book, I highly recommend it. If not, I tried to pull out all the important things for you. But
so we do have 2 questions in the chat. First, Vivian asks, would you be willing to send a copy of this via email? Vivian, this is recorded, so we will get that up on our YouTube channel and we can send that out to everyone that attended this workshop if you would like, but we can send that to you for sure. And if it's helpful, we can also send over the slides, no problem at all. Sadie asked, to you, Kirsten, what's a good work activity to focus on during the afternoon slump, 2 to 4 p.m.?
Yeah, she talks about how during that afternoon slump, the way that we can revitalize ourselves is actually through social interactions. So it's not necessarily a time for a meeting that's important that we need to be quiet and focused for, but if there's an activity that we can do that helps us communicate with others. So maybe we take a walk around the office, right, and do some of our touching of desks that we need to do face to face. Or she's a professor, and so she has her open hours during that time because students can come in and out of her office. That kind of breaks up her day. So anything that we can do to get social or get moving, it's a good time if you have the opportunity to schedule, a 15-minute walk during that to kind of get your brain back and working. So yeah, hopefully that kind of helps.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. Like Brittany said, this is recorded, so we'll have it posted for you guys soon. And hopefully it was helpful.
Thank you so very much. This was really great.
I'm glad everyone thought so. Okay, well, we'll see y'all soon. Thanks.